the greatest crime in the history of mankind. The disappearance of the red people from whom we have not heard of, the red Indians or the indigenous people of the American continent, and those of us who have not been seen about them when he depicted their brutality and their primitive lives, but even the young people watched the cartoons that tell stories about them and enjoyed watching their famous dance and their distinctive voices that they use using the mouth and the hand. But where are they now? And where did they disappear? Did they merge into civilization, become employees, merchants, and artists, mix with modern life and become more luxurious? Perhaps all we know about them, or imagine that they were brutal savage people hiding in the tops of the mountains to attack the poor white Americans and chase them with the hammers of the tomahawks, their own weapon, to kill them and tear them brutally as they depicted in American culture today. Truth is only a plundering and obliteration of the true image of the reality of the American Indians after they plundered their lives and lands, and it is only an attempt to bury a heinous crime that claimed more than 112 million people belonging to more than 400 nations and peoples. A year from the time until their number decreased to only 250,000, as calculated in the year 1900 AD. Yes, dear reader, this civilization and progress experienced by America today, democracy and big cities, are based only on the remains and skulls of the American Indians and on their plundered lands. They have been eliminated and wiped out of existence, in which the white man uses all the weapons, methods that no one can think of, nor think of even Satan himself. Unfortunately today, this total annihilation is described as merely marginal damages to spread civilization. When Italian traveler Christopher Columbus discovered the American continent, he thought that he reached the western coast of India and called its inhabitants the name the American Indians because of their distinctive reddish color. The Indians arrived at this place thousands of years before the discovery of Christopher, where they crossed it through the Bering Strait in northeastern Siberia, which connects northwestern North America with northeastern Asia, and lived a simple life in it. They relied on hunting and cultivating lands, forming a culture of their own and building the basis of their dealings on oral covenants and covenants, so they honored honesty and instilled it in the souls of their children, distinguished by interest in spiritual civilization and glorification of morals, and made women a special place in their lives. M. describes the Saline population in a writer dedicated to King Philip II. They are simple and kind people who are highly pleasant, patient, humble, very gullible, and obedient, far from evil, tricks, and deception, and they show great commitment to their traditions and obey the Spaniards, do not fight and do not fight, nor do they bear grudge against anyone. You do not have feelings of revenge, hatred, and enmity. They are very poor, but they do not carry feelings of greed and eagerness and insatiable. As for the discoverer Christopher Columbus, he says in a message he sent to the King and Queen of Spain, "These people are very kind, and very peaceful. I swear to your Majesty, that there is no nation in the world better than them." So the Red Indians bested the reception of the white man upon his arrival and taught him to farm and fish, believing that he is just a visitor or a guest who should be treated with kindness and generosity. People cut off from the world only have simple-minded fishing machines that are simple to deal with, and no war with the outside world has occurred. If there were some raids among their tribes, the leaders would quickly intervene to bring peace and end the fighting. The word war was used only in the language of some Indian tribes. The European colonizer quickly realized it is in front of the land of dreams rich in good things that the future civilization will build on, and that its inhabitants are simple people who do not possess a fighting weapon as well as an organized army, and realize what he should do, so he proceeded directly to the process of disposal and extermination without supervision and no accountability of human beings, and not taking into account any sanctity or law or humanity. Greedy on his land, they used guns and killed everyone who came across women, children, or young people, and they burned crops, let them starve to death, poisoned wells, and committed the most horrific massacres against thousands of Indians. The leaders of the Indian tribes, including what happens to their people, demanded peace treaties even though they did not fight the whites, but they may appear desperate attempts to prevent the white Americans from seizing their lands or kidnapping their daughters and their sons to work in the fields and mines until death. The important thing is that the other party or the white monster flew with joy in this. The request was carried out directly, provided that they departed from certain places, which they identified to be cultivated or constructed through the forced labor of those who kidnapped them. Then, after these treaties, they gifted hundreds of blankets and quilts to the Indians after each treaty they made with them, but what those poor people did not know, and they did not occur to you, even you, the reader, these gifts were brought from European sanatoriums laden with germs, the plague epidemic, diphtheria, measles, tuberculosis, and cholera, to harvest them without the slightest effort made by the enemy, and what remains of them are manually harvested. English Commander-in-Chief Lord Geoffrey Amherst says in a letter to Henry Blake asking him to negotiate with the Indians and then give them blankets poisoned by smallpox, and S.D. Blake replied by saying, "I will try hard to name them some of the contaminated covers that I will give them, and take the necessary precautions so that I don't get sick." Thus Satan dictates them and guides them to the shortest and most insidious way. And most of them were reaped by diseases before seeing the face of the white man. Then, the colonial authorities monitored the rewards and prizes for the one who kills a red Indian and brings his head to him, whether a child, a woman, or a man does not matter. The head is important. New to brutal extermination. Soon, hunters spread around the continent, bringing heads in huge numbers, and then confined themselves to the scalp to relieve them of trouble, and in order not to crow their wooden carriages with heads, and to be able to load the largest number of scales of children and women that are skinned. And many hunters boasted that their clothes and shoes made of Indian skins. They brag about their strength and hunting skill. And the English thug Lewis Wessel tells, that his spoils of Indian head fur are not less than 40 scales per one, and this means that the number of people who kill them in the month is 1,200 people, and maybe he lived many years in this bloody profession and is considered. Wesley today is one of the heroes of history American. Then it developed to make parties for skinning and acting that only the people attending, especially if the victim was one of the tribal leaders. Even the other criminal, George Rogers Clark, held a party to flay the scalp of 16 Indians and asked the butchers to slow down in the skin so that the audience would be happy to watch today, a patriotic symbol and a historical hero too. As for President Andre Jackson, who carries his $20 paper, he was a lover of skinning and mutilation, and he was commanding to calculate the number of his dead to count the number of their noses and severed ears. One of the methods of extermination committed by the British was the forced displacement of the tribes that lived near the Mississippi River to endemic areas that are not suitable for human life, as hundreds of thousands of Indians left their homes and fields as they shed tears of grief over the land on a long and arduous journey during which many died due to disease, cold, and hunger, and they were called this journey later, in the path of tears. 150 years of persecution and murder practiced by the British against the American Indians. No way was any ugliness except that it was used. Rather, sterilization did not forget them, so they mixed their wells and their food as they could with sterile drugs in order not to have children and new generations. Their eternity is interrupted forever. The Indians did not expect this agony and annihilation to come upon the waves of the Sea of Darkness or the Atlantic Ocean, but it is strange and unfortunate that the Indians thought that the new settler was a compassionate God who came to save them from evil. On the east side, he rid them of all evils, so they collected gold over the centuries to offer him an offering to these gods. The leaders entrusted hundreds of men to watch the beaches while waiting for this fleet in order for them to be guided by gold. So when the Spanish arrived, the Indians loaded their ships with gold in the belief that they were their expected gods. And soon this white monster realized that he was in front of his easy prey and he knew what he should do, which is the annihilation and seizure of the land of gold and good things. The Englishmen even increased it, and they reaped them with guns, forced them to dig mines and build compulsions to death, and they sold a lot of them in the slave market, and they committed what is hard to believe until they were said to have used children as food for dogs. It leaves deep pain in the breath and makes you shocked by those scenes where they take the little boy from the arms of his mother and wave him in the air and then leave him to fall and shatter on a stone or a wall, or tossing him inside the river, and if one of his parents tried to save him, they sent them with a bullet so that they would not spoil the scene on them. Sometimes the entire family tossed inside the river and prevented them from reaching the path of salvation until the strong currents swept them away and they died drowning. One of their methods is that they set fire to their huts and tents, and if they went out harbin, men are eliminated with guns. If only children and girls remain, they take them to work in forced labor and dig gold mines, or they are sold in the slave market. Certainly, girls provide additional service for males. In addition to heavy work during the day, organized rape in the evening. Las Casas mentions other atrocities in the writing, documents of the extermination of the Indians, which was translated into several languages. The writer is an eyewitness who sailed to the New World and saw what the Spaniards made with his own eyes. While describing what he saw and said, they were installing long gallows that they organized into groups, and each group it consists of 13 people who are hanged and then set fire to them and burn them. There are those who link bodies with dry straw and set fire to them, He says also, as for the masters of the Indians and their nobles, they were placed, they have a grill from the bars, then they are tied in them and a quiet fire is lit under them, to die slowly amid agony, pain, and groaning. When they shout a loud scream that disturbs the police commissioner during his sleep, they put in their throats pieces of wood to mute them. I saw that myself. As for those who escaped to the woods and mountains away from these ferocious beasts, have tamed them, fierce Seleucid dogs chasing them, and whenever they saw one of them bounced on it and tore it. Sorry dear reader, I feel that I hurt your heart, but this was a short scene from a painful era that the poor indigenous people suffered to come later and complete the brutal march of the Spaniards.